in studio with us is Pat Price. He was our Man Crush Monday, and he was so raw. He blew all the circuits out in the building, but he wanted his chance to come back and express his opinion. So he's going to be our, I guess you can say, male perspective for the remainder of the show. So welcome back.
Hi, Pat.
How you doing?
All right. I see. Okay. Yeah. How was the drive in?
It was great. I don't like this. This is a setup. I don't like it.
How was traffic? Was okay?
Yeah, traffic was great.
You need anything?
No.
water,
No, excuse me. I need to see her. No, I'm fine.
Okay.
So what is this leading to? Because y'all trying to draw me in. What is
No,
it?
we're not. Just we're making sure you're okay.
Comfortable.
All right, so we're going to go ahead, and like I said before we went to our little small transition break there, we're going to be talking about polygamy. And after the same-sex ruling came down from the Supreme Court, Chief Justice John Roberts expressed he felt it was going to really open the door for so many other things in regards to constitutional rights, specifically polygamy. Well, I had the chance, I was watching HuffPost Live yesterday and came across Dr. Elizabeth Cheff, we're going to call her AKA Dr. Eli, and she happens to be, let me just say this, the foremost expert on talking about polygamy. So without further ado, welcome to the Maya Akai Show. Dr. Eli, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, I'm having a really hard time hearing you. It sounds like there's a lot of echo in the background.
Okay, we'll have Rob make some adjustments there. Let me know if it still sounds like that to you. Does it sound better now? The echo all gone? No?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand that at all.
I said, is the echo still there?
Is that better?
No, I'm sorry. Your voice, sir, was good, but her voice is still a lot of echo. I can't understand what she's saying.
Okay, maybe we can try to reestablish the line because maybe that's part of the issue if we don't sound crystal clear. Because I want to make sure every part of this conversation that people can actually hear what you're saying. So we'll have Rob. We'll go ahead and disconnect you, and then Rob he'll try to fix out so you can sound good calling in. We'll make sure that you can hear everything. So while we're kind of reestablishing her, let's talk a bit about Dr. Eli and what she has. So pretty much as I said, that she is an expert when you talk about polygamy, multiple partner relationships, also called plural marriages in some cases.
Hi, should I call back in?
Nope. Can you hear us now? Is that better?
Kind of. It sounds like you're really far away, or you're speaking to me from the end of a tube or something.
Okay.
When your assistant speaks to me, it's very clear.
That makes sense.
But your voice is far away.
We're going to have to go back and switch her to probably the main line. Let's do that. Let's have you established on the main line, and then we'll go from there. So as I was saying, Dr. Elizabeth Cheff is we call her Dr. Eli, whoever calls that. She is the author of Polyamorous Next Door, Inside Multiple Partner Relationships and Families. She is one of the handful of experts when you talk about polygamy or polyamorous relationships. She herself actually lived in that type of relationship and found it wasn't for her, but reason why it might work for other people. And as I said, I came across her. She was on HuffPost Live, and this was one of the conversations, that now that same-sex marriages are legal, does this open the door for plural marriages? Now, we've heard things like common law marriages exist, people who don't get married, but if you, reside long enough in the same household, in some states that's acknowledged. You're considered to be married.
It's like 7 years and something.
Some in 7 years, 7 to 10 years.
Yes,
right.
Depending upon where you are.
Yeah, okay. 7 to 10 years. So with that being said, people feel like now with the same-sex marriage ruling rolling out, that it's going to open the door for other types of marriages to be put on the table. Obviously, polygamy is not something that's legal in this country, though we do know there's plenty of people who live that way.
Yes.
A.k.a. Mormons. No, and
Yes.
outside of that, too. It's not just Mormons.
Right.
But it was interesting on HuffPost Live because there were people who were living in these kind of relationships who supported it and said, people are kind of maybe misconstruing or don't understand really what polygamy is. And one of the things that Dr. Eli mentioned as we get her back on the line is that, believe it or not, and this is actually true, and I had this thought in my forefront when I did this, is that based from a biblical perspective, believe it or not, it was commonplace for people to live in polygamous marriages. Biblically, there were plenty of biblical figures that actually had multiple wives.
So and cultures that also,
and there's still cultures around the world
that
feel it's perfectly okay for, in most cases, for a man to have multiple wives, not necessarily a woman. So it's not a practice that's uncommon, even from a global perspective, and that there have been more people, actually that type of marriage has been more common and known to the world than actually just a single man-woman, same-gender marriage has ever been around. So that's the first thing, we put that in perspective, that she really jumped into talking about how, even within this country, how that framework worked from more of a racial standpoint, more so than it did from a standpoint of it being culturally accepted for everybody. And what was interesting, and I want her to weigh in on this when we get her back on the line, is people that were on the panel talking about this said a couple things that I thought was interesting. To say that people don't get married because of love. They get married because maybe they want health benefits, maybe they need citizenship. It was interesting, a lot of people on the panel felt that love was not the reason that people got married. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I got married for love. Did I miss the memo on that?
No, I think most people do. I mean, there are some people. There are some people that I think get married for other things, like they need citizenship, and that it is convenience, and that kind of is a business more so than actually be in love. There are some people that do that, but I think generally, for the most part, you love somebody. That's a long time to stay with somebody you don't love.
Okay.
That's weird.
People do it, though.
All right, so let's jump into it. Do we have Dr. Eli back on the line?
Hi.
All right, there you are. Can you hear us better now? A little bit better? Okay.
Your patience.
Okay. No, thank you, because we definitely want to make sure you can hear, because I want to. So for the average person, put the idea of polygamy from a historical standpoint into perspective, because we obviously have our own ideas that we just think it's people being married to multiple partners and it's acceptable, but you're the expert on this. Put this in perspective for us.
Well, the historical ideal for marriage has often been totally disconnected from love and much more focused on creating a living. So if you are an upper class person, then creating alliances with other leaders or business people. If you're a middle class person, then creating some way to have your lands next to someone else, or certainly not focused on love. That is less than 100. Or one man with multiple wives is much more common.
Now, see, you just said something. Now, you just said something I think most people I didn't distinguish between the two. You said polygamy and then there's polygamy. Just re-explain the difference between those two things.
Okay, polygyny is when one man has multiple wives, and that's super common. Polyandry is when one woman has multiple husbands, and that is extremely rare historically and cross-culturally, hardly ever happens. Monogamy lies somewhere in the middle of those two, but across the board, the harem form with one man with often 3 or 4 wives is most common.
If polygamy was more prevalent in cultures and as you said, like this was a common practice, then where did monogamy come in at?
Ironically, monogamy is more of a Judeo-Christian figment than other forms. Even early Christians did not rely on monogamy, but slowly it just kind of seeped in part because as men developed more goodies, had more physical items to hand down, they wanted to know who their biological children are. So monogamy actually came out of controlling women's sexuality so men could let their own biological sons inherit their wealth.
So in talking about this, when I think about the idea of monogamy and marriage and just being married to one person, even when we look from a global standpoint, there are many other cultures and countries that actually still have the practice of, mainly, like you said, men having multiple wives. So with this country obviously being founded on Judeo-Christian, values, from the very start, was that the practice when this country was founded? Or was there some point of time, like you think about, for instance, like the mid-50s or, 40s or 50s when you had shows like Fathers Know Best and, the Donna Reed, Leave It to Beaver and stuff like that. It totally was, that was the imagery of what the American family was supposed to look like.
Absolutely. And look like that. For some specific race and class, it looked just like that for years, but it's not kind of the most neutral form of family, or the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not the iconic form of family that we think of it as.
Okay, so in this country, we pretty much have bought into that imagery of what we think that's what family is supposed to look like. That's partially why the reason we struggle with the idea or concept behind same-sex marriage. So with that being said, is it so far-fetched to believe that if people want to push for polygamy, why would that be something so difficult to say yes to?
Well, it's certainly different from monogamy, but we have actually people living in polygamous marriages already in the United States. We have a significant kind of subset of religious polygamy for some Muslim people who practice Islam and some fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. So we've got people doing it already, and it appears not to be damaging most of them. When polygamy appears to be the most damaging, it's when it keeps women from getting an education. It forces very young women to marry much older men. That's definitely damaging, the control over women and children.
Now,
The vast majority of polygamous relationships in the U.S. are consensual, healthy, and happy relationships.
And it's interesting because I think when we think about polygamy, we think about the Mormon religion, and then you have shows like Sister Wives on that either make it a good case or it makes people feel like it's totally wrong. But now you did a lot of research into these kind of multiple partner relationships and families. What did you find in your research?
Actually, I researched polyamory specifically. So the difference between polyamory and polygamy is that both men and women in polyamory can have multiple partners at the same time. So usually under polygyny, it's only the husband who has multiple wives, but each wife is basically monogamous with the husband, and the reverse of that under polyandry, which again is rare. For polyamory, both men and women can have multiple partners, and that gender equality ends up being extremely important for women's freedom, for the families to kind of blend into mainstream society, and for children to see that both kinds of adults can have multiple loving relationships.
Now, when you say multiple partners, are we talking just, they're not married, are they? Or is everyone married, or are two people married and then they
not
just
everyone
go?
is married.
Okay.
Some people are married. Mostly they're married to just one other person because it's not legal to be married to more than one.
Right.
But they do occasionally do other forms of commitment that aren't marriage. So things like hand fasting or commitment ceremonies. Hand fasting is a pagan ritual where they tie with soft cord, tie the wrists of the people who are committing to each other for, the old ceremony was 3 days. A lot of people don't stay tied at the wrist for three full days anymore. But non-marital forms of commitment are popular among the polyamorists.
So they're physically tied together, and do they stay that way for maybe 3 days, you're saying?
Yes, tied together at the wrist is traditional hand fasting, and it's a two-part lesson, kind of, that it's wonderful to be close, but if you're too close, if you're all up in each other's business all the time, then it gets to be a drag. So the hand fasting says, yeah, be close, but look what a pain in the neck it is to be attached at the hip.
Wow.
So it encourages some closeness with the kind of caveat that you also need some separation.
How they go to the bathroom?
That's
Usually at the end of the 3 days, they're really excited to get